Hi, welcome to the Dark Night of the Soul Unwrapped.
Thanks, Fiona. It's so good to see you as always.
Yeah, you too. So, my first question is more or less the same for everybody, and then we veer off into different things. But the
Yeah.
place I'd like to start is what was going on for you just before your Dark Night of the Soul began?
Oh, so I was I was trying to imagine what your first question was going to be, and I did not. I kind of was connecting to that today, actually. However, I'm also like, which dark night of the soul?
Right, okay.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, but that's like because that's what I thought. I don't know what I thought your question was going to be, but I was like, yeah, which one? But as I was pondering that, I could see basically what you've just asked, which would kind of what came before it. And I would say that, how we heal in relationship and we get wounded in relationship, right? So a lot of a lot of my both trauma and healing have come from the interweaving of these different relationships that I've been in, like whether it's like platonic or romantic or whatnot. But it just so happens that some concurrent dark nights were from like intimate romantic relationships going bad.
Hmm.
So the first one, which I usually don't consider, um, I don't really think about it, but today I was like, no, that kind of brought it on where I'd had an ending with a partner that really was out of like left field. Like I was totally blindsided in such a way that it just took me down. And I wanna just name here, you can't see it, but my cat literally just extended her paw onto my hand, just
Oh,
as I'm like, I can feel the depth of it, and I guess Pearl can feel that as well, my little baby. So, yeah, that heartache and heartbreak and just, um, woke me up out of it disrupted a lot of survival strategies that I'd been using. I just they were like stripped.
hmm.
And when those strategies are stripped, it gets real dark, right? And then what happens sometimes for people, sometimes not, but what happened for me is that I waited through that for a little bit, and had some really good seeing, some good clarity. Um, but then ultimately went back to some survival strategies and got in another relationship that split me open even more, really, really painfully. And so that dynamic, yeah, just gutted me in a whole other way.
Hmm.
And um, and I guess I was a different person at that period of time, and so at that point I was really committed to staying in. With whatever was happening, I was committed to staying in and getting through. Um, and it was dark. It was really dark, and I could talk forever about it probably, but yeah, the answer to your question is like relationship spurred it.
Yeah, right. There's so much in there already. I'd love to say a bit more about what survival strategies are for anybody who's not
Yeah,
really familiar with that. What
yeah,
did that mean for you at
yeah,
that point?
yeah. I think like the easiest way to get at it is just to talk a little bit about attachment styles. And I think a lot of people at this point are pretty savvy to attachment theory and attachment styles. And at that time in my life, I wasn't. I had never heard of them. Um, but there can be dynamics in our young years that lead us to different kinds of ways of being in regards to attachment. Like we can either develop a lot of strategies that have to do with anxiety and like ways that we might engage that keep us from feeling anxiety. Um, or we might avoid it altogether, right? We might avoid the anxiety and do something else to keep it hidden from ourselves. And that was me. I mean,
Huh.
not black and white, and so to speak, but a lot of mostly avoidant patterning for me. So much that I didn't know myself that I was anxious or fearful. I hid it from myself. So a survival strategy can act like that, where to keep us um, in line, based on my childhood, to keep in line, I had to deny a lot of. I had to mask and deny and avoid and just hide what was actually happening for me and even from me.
Yeah, absolutely. So when that you use these words, gutted me and split me open, that that already there's such a viscerality to that, isn't there? What what happened when you got gutted, when those survival strategies stopped working?
Yeah, I found myself well, I like how you said there's such a visceralness to it. And it's not like I was completely dissociated all the time. It's just that I hadn't leaned into certain resonances inside of myself, So yeah, I was afraid all the time. I felt fear like I'd never felt it before. And I think it's useful to say as well that I was in a period of my life and I was with a lot of people, um, and of course you'll know this real well, uh, who really we prided ourselves on not being afraid. We prided ourselves on like not like on being spiritually evolved, you know, so that we didn't there wasn't a self to be afraid, or there wasn't, like a lot of non-dual misappropriation of non-dualism, we could say. Not the true teachings, but a bastardization that happened in this country or in Western cultures, where it turns into something super dysfunctional and disembodied, and really delusional even. And so that, I was surrounded in a way by a lot of people like that. So there was this pride in not in like not having fear and not having anxiety, and I was already working as a somatic therapist and also like in the non-dual world, um, mainly at that point. So it was devastating
Mm,
to ego personality, like unbelievably like disruptive and so much shame, of and like unfortunately, I didn't have, a therapist at the time. I didn't have good counsel. I didn't have good guidance. So it was kind of just like the delusional, in me guiding the delusion.
right.
I mean, luckily, I did also have um, I did have practices and some things to help me, and to guide me and to bring me into my heart and into my body that were very kind and wonderful. But I also had just a lot of false narratives from the spiritual community and a lot of shame that I wasn't, of what I wasn't, that I thought was really bad and wrong.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would have been envious of you at the point where you felt that you weren't anxious and afraid, because I
Yeah, but we have different,
couldn't
yeah,
not be, right? We were sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and it seems to me that there's a particular link between shame and fear.
Oh my gosh.
I-
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much in spiritual communities, right? But I think in culture at large. And so
Yeah,
we get into this cycle of shame and fear that then perpetuates itself, I think,
yeah,
to at least some
yeah,
extent, right?
absolutely. Yeah. So the first time, like the first little break, I did have that. but I don't remember it as much as the second time when I was like, with that second relationship where it was just immense. Um, and also to say, the relationship that I wound up in and got out of was an abusive relationship where I was gaslit a lot. So not only was my own psyche gaslighting me in tunement with the spiritual community, but I was in this relationship where the person was gaslighting me and, just as I had been as a child. So it was like this perfect storm to like break patterning, which I can say now, like, wonderful. At the time, though, like I literally wanted to kill myself every day. And like that is not over dramatizing it. Like I just did not want to. It was so hard to be in this body, in this life. And I used every healthy practice that I could connect with. And yeah, just I guess there was a part of me that either well, I mean, I had supported so many other people through their dark nights, which is the irony, right? And my own previous challenging time, which I thought was a dark night, but and it's all relative, right? I guess there was just something that trusted the process and trusted something beyond me. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Did you recognize it as a dark night or spiritual emergency early on?
It's a great question. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine after the first incident where I could feel the darkness and I was talking to him about it and there was recognition that that was what was happening. So, yeah, I would say like by the time the second one came around, it was like, oh, this is a dark night of the soul. It's also just a total unraveling of patterning and of um the wounded me, you know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that unraveling is so much at the core of what this is, right?
Yeah,
That we're thrust into everything that we've been trying to not be. And like
that's
you say,
it.
when you've got that coming from multiple sources at once, that the spiritual messages replay the childhood messages, which are replayed then by a partner in relationship, to to trust our own process in the face of all of that is a really difficult thing to do, isn't it?
Really hard. Yeah.
Were there were there moments when that came in or something connected you to your process in a way that meant that you could trust it?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that was happening a lot. Um, I mean, like, 2 things can be true, right? I can literally like, with most of my being not want to be here, and with another part of my being, um, trust that I'm within something happening, and they simultaneously were co-occurring. And so it it wasn't like but I was also really committed to not den pretending or denying or, bypassing. I was really like, there's there's moments, that I'll always remember, and one of them was, um, I had maybe read about I was trying to use as much, like, brain science as I could in a practical way to just help me, you know, and to help my nervous system. And I remember reading something about, like, the hormones released with gratitude, right? But I didn't wanna do this, like, "I'm grateful for the stars, and I'm grateful for the" you know, I don't know, I didn't wanna fluff
Yeah.
like, I didn't want to have the laundry list of, like, empty gratitudes, like, I didn't wanna talk myself out of my misery. I wanted to be as real could be, including gratitudes, and so every night I would, like, get a pen and I'd write something, and sometimes the list was really small. And sometimes I would just like write some paragraphs about like a moment that felt really nurturing to me or kind, And I remember one night I just felt with every ounce of my being, like how grateful I was for the pen in my hand and the light behind me.
Hmm.
That, and just because it was so real in my body, like something just changed. It was a pivotal moment for me, because I could just feel like the sincere and embodied, like gratitude for just this pen and this light, you know? So the realness, like we're craving realness always, really, but we don't know how to connect to it because we live in a culture that kinda doesn't want us to connect to realness and lots of other reasons. So, I don't remember what your original question was, but
Yeah, I mean, I think realness is such a huge thing in this, isn't it? I think in the
yeah.
dark night that we have no choice but to be in the realness a lot of the time because, as you said, the survival strategies, the ways that we've tried to not be in what's
Mm.
really here just don't work anymore. And I think
Yeah, and
that's immensely challenging, isn't it? And yet there's something in that, isn't there? There's some kind of relief, some kind of sense of this is reality.
yes. Yeah. Well, and what comes to say is that, like, aloneness and a feeling of separation are, I I think, essentially what maybe make us suffer, like that belief or experience of being separate, like, we suffer when we believe that, right? And at the same time, I had been evading that. I'd been evading my experientialness, like, my belief in my separateness, my belief in my aloneness. And so to be real with that is excruciatingly painful, but also, like you said, it's freeing eventually, but it's a path. Like if you want realness, you gotta, you don't have to, but the invitation is to move through it through illness, and that can be really uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm aware that I'm sure both of us in the past, before our dark nights, used relationship as a way to avoid the sense of being separate and alone. I mean, certainly that was
Really,
true for me.
anything I could.
Right. And I would be aware somewhere within myself that that there was a deal that I was doing there, which was really to my detriment. And yet I
Yeah,
couldn't stop myself from doing it until, I mean, interestingly, it was my dark night started very soon after getting into yet another relationship, which at the start felt like it was completely different and new. But actually, of course, as we know,
yeah, as we know.
beautifully replayed dynamics from my childhood. And so I think then we're thrust into that excruciating aloneness with no choice. And yet
Yeah,
there are those
and
moments,
yeah. Sorry, I
those
was just gonna say, we will do everything we can to not go that direction. So, like, mercy to the human. Of
oh,
course, we're gonna get another dysfunctional relationship. No one's gonna willingly choose to do that, you know?
completely. I mean, yeah, we know without doubt that it is the last thing we will do, right? And we certainly wouldn't do it willingly. And and yet, from quite early on, in retrospect, in amongst all the excruciating pain, there are those moments of something else. Like you said, you
Yeah,
knew that there was something happening. So even though there was the wanting to die and the pain, there was this sense of something moving.
yeah. Yeah.
something happening. Did you have any sense of what that was at the time, or simply that something was happening?
Well, I mean, I would say now from this like, and even at the time, again, the co-occurrence, yes, wanting to die and also realizing something's waking up. Like something is shifting from something to something else and waking up from wounds, you know. And part of that, again, I didn't have a therapist. I didn't really have great support, but I was always the irony, I was guiding people through that as well. So, like, it's like it was my world on some level, like, it was happening in me, it was happening with my clients, like, we were it wasn't like, there was so much, um, mutual occurrence, not planned, but, just the way that it worked. So, I think, like, I know, like, as I would guide people through theirs, I knew I was being guided through mine,
Hmm.
and that's the beauty of the work that we do. Is like it offers such depth of mutuality and also the invitation to be going deep in one's own life as much as you are supporting someone to go deep in their life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I loved what you said about something is waking up from the wounds.
Yeah, yeah,
And we know that the word awakening is used very liberally in all sorts of
yeah.
different contexts. What is your sense of what it is that's waking up in the sense that we're talking about it?
Well, the language I use now is really different. I experience it more as a remembering, like a remembering of what I am created from and what I am in that creation.
Hmm.
Um, so it feels different than I mean, and yes, in the remembering there is awaking awakening happening, awakening happening or waking up moments happening where there is, um, a seeing and a being, that is, in conjunction with that remembering, um, not what I had thought it was at some other point, you know?
Yes, I think that throughout the Dark Night and in all the years since, for me, there's been a constant sense of, oh, this is not at all what I thought it was. In fact, often it's
Yeah,
like 180-degree turn,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I love that notion of remembering, because implicit in that is the sense that we're simply remembering something that on some level we already know, that on some level is already inside us in some way. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's something that's already inside of us, and, in our young years, things happen that cloud us from that knowing, that lead us to have, um, disconnection from our creature, from our being, right? Pain will do that to a little creature, if a little creature is in pain and they're not getting support, of course they're gonna harden or protect or develop strategies to try to have control or safety or, through any means possible, right? And then so the dysfunctional responses to dysfunction just start to multiply, right? And as children, we can't have functional
Right.
responses to dysfunction. We have to be dysfunctional in response to dysfunction. Like we don't that's not a choice. That's
Yeah,
just an occurrence.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah, so we just get really trapped in that, but also culture, right? Like, we live in a very capitalistic, productive-oriented culture, not a heart culture, not a nervous system, a sacred nervous system culture. So there's, from early ages, we're off to school, we're off to earning money, we're trying, we're like on this rat race in this hamster wheel, and there's just no honoring of who we really are underneath all of the efforting and surviving this culture. Yeah, it's a whole shit show.
Completely. I mean, I'd love to explore that more in our next episode.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
love what you said about creatureness. That's something
mm,
that's come up for me in a really big way, the recognition of my creatureness, and how when we pretend or somehow imagine that we're not creatures, things start to go wrong, basically in the ways that you
it
just
really
described. We become hardened, we become, prone to being exploitative and all of those other things that you were just describing with culture. How did your relationship with your creatureness and your bodiness change over that
mm,
period?
mm. Hmm. Wow, these are really great questions. I mean, I wanna answer that question, but I'm actually was immediately transported to an early experience, not like super, super early, but at some point I really started to study like land-based practices, and so like um when we're separate from nature, which our culture tends to be because we're too busy decimating it, right? Then we also we don't know how to acknowledge our our creatureness. So as I started to like tap into some nature-based practices, I was able to kind of connect to that in me, that I am of nature. Nature is of me. Like we are interdependent. The trees and I are siblings. I didn't have that language exactly, but I something was like getting really savvy to that fact, that
Hmm.
that reality, you know. Um, and then so different practices would come in that I would utilize the elements. At that time, I was doing that, and then yeah, how did that I think luckily there were a couple people that I had contact with that used some of that language to really honor the being. And my language is always shifting, yours probably too. My language is always coming and going with different words. Um, Sometimes like there's been years when I don't use the word creature, but lately it's coming back for some reason. And I don't know why that is. It's interesting. I think that it just does on some level really honor that we are in relationship all the time. We are interrelating every single moment of every moment. Um, and so to be able to honor that, I have to be in the exchange and like in the breath that's now, breathed through me. It's a new moment. My creature is now new again, right? And
Mm.
on some level. And so like that perpetual um sweet and sacred noticing. Oh, yeah, breath is really landing in this way in this moment. It's like it's such a generous perspective or a generous way of orienting. Um, and so, yeah, that to me, like it lends itself into the creature that is just, um, you know, I want to say creaturing, but it's like, just this moment of the current, like
Yeah,
the squirrels dig in my pot, and I'm breathing the breath, and like we're just, being ourselves. And
that reminds me of a moment probably quite early on in my dark night. So this is going back somewhere. I suddenly had a moment, and at the time, just to set the context, I'd got very into the non-dual, no self kind of
yeah,
teachings, and I felt like I really wasn't getting it because there was so much moving in my system. Thankfully, I mean, in retrospect, I'm really
right?
grateful for that. But I did have this moment one day when I was reading one of those books and I was a bit frustrated, and then something came in, and I don't really know where from, but I just got this sense of like, oh, cats and dogs aren't wandering around trying to work out how to make themselves better. And I just
Oh,
cracked up laughing. It was so funny to me in that moment. The whole notion, and I think this fits with what we were saying about creatureness, that we don't look at our pets or any other animals and say, well, you really need to get a bit better at X, Y, or Z. And there was something in that moment that just broke the spell for a moment of
amazing.
I need to that being this is not okay. I need to be that.
Yeah.
That
Yes. Oh my
whole mindset. And I've come, many years later, I've come to think of that as a sort of colonial approach to ourselves when we view
yeah.
both our bodies and ourselves as um, our property essentially, and a property that has to be maintained in a particular way, that has to look a certain way, and how the Dark Knight is in that shift, in the falling apart of even the
Oh
possibility of trying to become something.
my gosh.
There's a seeing ourselves as creature has a real tenderness and kindness in it,
Yeah.
right? There's a
Yeah.
sense of like, of course this creature is doing what it's doing. Of
Yeah.
course it's in the survival strategies and all of that because that's what the
Yeah.
creature does, right?
Yeah. It responds to what is there. It's that movement that's co-occurring, right? And I love how you brought in like how the kindness of it. It feels a slightly different, but also like really adjacent to what you were saying. Maybe just different words, but we are so indoctrinated into this sense of morality of right, wrong, good or bad, right? And so, like on some level, the immense amount of shame that I had as things started to crumble was rooted in that. Like I'm not doing it right. I'm bad. This is wrong. Like I am fucking up. I am like you know fill in the blank, right? And that is, that mindset, of course, just keeps us stuck. Um, but eventually, there was kind of like the making friends with fear that was happening. Thankfully, that had already been happening for a few years, and I had that to help me. Like, I didn't have to deny that I was afraid. I didn't have to deny that I wanted to kill myself. I didn't have to deny that it was really hard. I didn't have to deny, I could just be like, "Yeah, actually can't really eat right now, but I'm gonna do my best to, like, get in some food any way I can," and, yeah, the reality is I would take 3 baths a day. I could mark my level anxiety by my water bill. Like, I used to joke
Hmm.
about it a year later, like, "Oh, that month was hard." I would take 2 to 3 baths, and, like but I was honoring my creature, right? I was like,
Oh,
this is needs to happen, and I grieved, and I cried, and I was split open so many times in that tub, because I was finally submitting to the creature on some level, to
mm,
the being. So, yeah.
beautiful. I think for anybody who hasn't experienced it, it's hard to describe just how much crying is involved in this. And
Yes.
and I think it's easy to take
Yeah.
that, certainly at the beginning, as evidence of all the things you just described, as evidence of
Yeah.
like I'm doing it wrong and there must be a way of stopping this, and yet there's something so important and beautiful and essential in that
Yeah.
crying.
So important, yeah. I remember writing a poem, I don't remember the full poem, but I remember the line, like, "I coughed up a fur ball in the tub today," basically, like, just like this energetic, like, purging would be happening amidst sobs. and absolutely important. And it got easier again when I made friends with it. When I knew it was part of a process, it wasn't me messing up or me bad or wrong, which is the first narratives I would have. When I could remember, like, oh, this is the process. This is the releasing. Like, this is wisdom, right? And I wanted to like bring in something you had said earlier, like it's 180-degree. Often it'll be a 180-degree turn from what we had thought things were, and that's what can make this really hard. Is that like it can feel so counterintuitive because the indoctrination is so off, you
Yes.
know?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that making friends with what we had been indoctrinated or I had been indoctrinated to believe was a sign of weakness or a sign of fill in the blank. Now I could recognize, oh, this is wisdom coming forth. And to make friends with the coming apartness was also so liberating. Not easy, but liberating. So that now when I have these big cries, I'm like, thank you. Yes. I'm opening, and releasing in like beautifully, you know?
Completely. I often think of it as learning another language or being in a different terrain, and
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
what you say about where we discover what we thought was wisdom actually wasn't wisdom at all. And the
Mhm.
the profound wisdom that starts to arise from the coming apart. It's not us doing it in any shape or form, is it? It's that I think our willingness to submit, as you were saying, to the process allows the wisdom to start to come up in its own way, in its own forms, and it takes so many forms, doesn't it? I mean, it can
Yeah, it
can
really
come
does.
in so
Yeah.
many different ways. I think when we start to really, we start to get some experience behind us. We start to know that
Yeah. Yeah.
the falling apart that we dreaded because we thought it would obliterate us. We've come through a number of cycles of that. I think when we get to that point, we can start to have some kind of trust in it.
Yes. Yes, and that's so important. Even if we can't name it, like something in our nervous system starts to recognize something of wisdom of the process. And like it even may be a subtext, but the system knows. The system starts to feel safe to be more fully in itself.
Yeah, and I think certainly for me, the most intense part of the Dark Night was about 4 years. And in those 4 years, it felt like I didn't really have the choice about whether I was in it or not. So there isn't
Mhm.
often, I
Right.
think, we're not able to gauge it according to how we feel. But I think yeah, over time, the fact that something has happened in those times when we've been right in, those moments in the tub of being broken apart, something emerges from that, right? In different ways on different days that we could never have foreseen, sometimes even half an hour before, right? I know
Absolutely.
we've both had this experience now many, many times. And I think the Dark Knight is really the start of that in a sense, isn't it? That there's something about that, those initial uh break being broken open in that way that starts to, yeah, maybe rewire our system or something
Right.
along those lines to this other kind of wisdom.
Yeah, and this other kind of um, allowance to be within life in a way, because life, like, there is always change and unpredictable change, right? And so when we trust something of the changing nature of life, then there's a sense of allowance and fluidity then that we are able to show up with, because we're less trying to control and we're more comfortable with not knowing what's next.
Yeah. And of course, that includes not liking what comes next, doesn't it? It's like,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that it's like we're attuned to the changing nature of life much more
Yeah.
than we were. I wanted to go back to something we said a while back where you were talking about things happening in parallel. Know that you were
Mhm.
both coming to life and wanting to die. And because I think there's something about
Yeah.
the paradox or the parallel
Yeah.
tracks of this that runs all the way through this experience and beyond. I
Yeah.
think we're so used to, and again, this is a cultural thing, it's either this or it's that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so often I think we're starting with the Dark Knight, we're really being invited to or being forced, depending on the day, to be in multiple places at once in a way, aren't we? That we start to be able to hold both immense grief and moments of joy, or wanting to be here, loving being here, and not wanting to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The dynamic of being human, right?
yeah.
Like, it's a very dynamic existence, but we're often trained to orient to just a binary, just a one thing that's happening, right? Whether it's wonderful or horrible, we can often get locked and then denying the full dynamic of our existence. So then we're accidentally feeding separation, right? And loneliness because
Mm.
we're holding on and trying to keep away and oh, you know?
Yeah, I mean, life inevitably seems to find its way in, doesn't it? However much, we think we've got this worked out, this keeping things out, they tend to find a way to seep in, don't they? And I think at the start of the Dark Knight, for me, that was both terrifying and shameful, and it felt like I couldn't possibly come back from that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's what makes it so dark, I think, on some level, is you literally cannot see the end. Now, at some
Yeah,
point, I think something starts to shift, but there was definitely for me, I was like, I don't see an end to this. Like, I trust that there is one, but oh my goodness, like, yeah, hard.
yeah. And I think it the Dark Knight wouldn't be able to do what it does were that not the case, right? We have
True.
to be in that. And it's a strange thing to say, isn't it? But it really does literally feel dark, doesn't it? We're not just talking about darkness metaphorically. There's a deep felt sense of that, isn't there? And not being able to see,
Yeah.
yeah, often to the next day, let alone coming through it. Just before we wind up, thinking about anybody who's in it right now, who's in that place, what would you want to share with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are really tricky times right now, right? And it's great to be having this conversation right now. And just to say also that, dark nights, they can look so differently. Like, they can look like years. It can look like on and off, it can just be like a weekend on some level where, like, there's just a very, deep unraveling, and, and that experience can also be a dark night, kind of experience. So it doesn't have to be even, it may look really different for different people, and so no matter how it looks, I would say, like, the core component of it is just not being able to see the end, and that's where I like, in these times right now are like, "Oh boy," like, what are we in this material plane world, right? And then
Yeah,
likely to mirror some kind of internal um, co-occurrence, like because we are always the inner and the outer are always in relationship. So that this time period can bring up some real existential crises for people. Um, maybe it's even sparking that, an existential crisis or sparking the meeting of some internal wounds that haven't yet been met because of the chaoticness of the external, the material plane, we might say. So one, I would definitely say find some people to be with, find community, online or in person. Um, I would say connect to simple, mundane joys or pleasures. Like, I mean, I kind of made fun of the stars earlier, but, like noticing our relationship with nature. Um, I'm pretty sure my cats were a huge, and my daughter were a huge component of getting through my own dark night. So, our nervous systems need camaraderie. We need people, whether it's like a Zoom or in person, like our nervous systems, we need each other. And that can be the hardest, like, it can be so hard. I even just watch in my private practice, I watch people with certain patterning when they need a session the most, they cancel because the shame and the disconnect and the avoidance just start to take over. So if we can know our predictables and know our tendencies that are maybe not the most functional, and we can say like, okay, this is when I pull back, but maybe I can lean in a little bit. Like who can I connect to? Like what friend can hold space for me or professional, like I'm a big fan of um obviously somatic therapy practices and spiritual guidance from people. And that has probably saved my life a few times. So but not everyone has the funds to do that. And so looking for those places where we can get it is so, so, so important. Yeah, so that's what I would say is like have
Yeah,
some conversations with people like that
that,
are can hold space for you.
yeah, absolutely. I just add, I
Mhm.
remember when I was really in it, that even very simple things like feeling the wall behind me or the floor beneath me, the wood of the floor. I mean, very, very simple. And often the simpler, the better.
Yeah. That's kind of like
Music.
right now, that is like the almost the center of the work I do with most people is like because we don't even have our neural pathways are not oriented to the simple. So it actually takes some efforting and some conscious work or cognizant work to be like, what is simple right now? And like so most of my like recordings on Insight Timer are basically directing attention to like what is so simple for the nervous system right now, and when I ask that question, like my attention immediately goes to the pillow behind me and it's like, oh, here we
Mm.
are. Like, yes, thank you. Like, this is nice. It's so important.
Yeah, I love that question. And just to say, I'll link to your insight timer
Mhm.
in the show notes. But just, I think often when we're in these very heightened, very intense states, there's a complicatedness to it, often in the way that completely naturally our thinking is freaked out, our nervous systems are freaked out. And so just to ask that question, what's the simplest thing here just now? Yeah, I think that it drops into something. I mean, I can immediately feel the feel of the cover, on my
Yeah.
hand. L- yeah, lovely. So Lee, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it, and I really look forward to
Yeah.
our next episode.
Yeah. Thank you.